Hello and welcome to All for Animals. I'm your host, Rachel, and today we've got a really cool guest on the show, and I'm so excited to talk with her. But before we dive right on into that interview, I'm going to give a little bit of a trigger warning here because Janie is here to tell us all about hermit crabs, which that might seem like a pretty fun and lighthearted topic, but there's a catch. The pet hermit crab industry is pretty scary, to say the least. And unfortunately, too often our little shelled friends are seen as disposable pets. And they're really treated that way. So just be warned, we're going to be discussing the many ways that hermit crabs are neglected and abused in this episode. So I'd like to welcome on Janie and let her introduce herself.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. My name's Janie. I've had hermit crabs for about 6.5 years now. And this past year, I've really immersed myself into advocating for them and helping people properly care for the hermit crabs. And I'm really just here to answer any questions people might have on social media. My DMs are always open. So I've really been putting a lot of time this past year into helping others and helping hermit crabs. So it's been really fun helping people and just spreading the word.
Wonderful. And I'm so happy to have you on here because honestly, I feel like there's a lot of pets out there that people don't necessarily assume are anything to be like taken, seriously.
Yeah,
They're treated
yeah.
disposably. And I think hermit crabs are really, really high on that list.
Hermit crabs, even betta fish, goldfish, they
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately all are like probably the most mistreated animals in the pet industry, and it's really heartbreaking.
Definitely. And I mean, it just goes to show that the size of the animal doesn't mean anything, especially,
Exactly.
and like the tanked animals, they're still
Yeah,
important.
yeah. Size should not equate to worth of any living
Exactly.
creature. Yeah.
All right. So, I'm sure this is probably the most important or most often asked questions.
Mhm.
What got you interested in hermit crabs specifically?
Yeah, so when I was a really little kid, I grew up in New Jersey, always going to the Jersey Shore, and I was always exposed to those beach shops that sell hermit crabs. And as a uneducated child, we got some hermit crabs as kids. They lasted a couple years, not too long though. They did not have the proper care whatsoever. But then again in junior year of high school, I was at the beach and I was like, why not just, let's get more hermit crabs. Like let's relive my childhood. And so I got some hermit crabs and little did I know all that goes into taking care of them. So kind of spun into a rabbit hole on their proper care, how long they can live, which is decades in the wild, which a lot of people don't know, and just
Mm-hmm.
how expensive they are to properly care for. They are so misunderstood and mistreated that they're just marketed as disposable souvenirs. So people get them as kids just thinking it's a fun, easy pet, and that's the furthest from the truth. So 6.5 years ago, when I got my hermit crabs, I didn't know nearly as much as I know now. And it wasn't until the past few years I really, really upped my game on proper care. I just find them the cutest little things to walk planet Earth, honestly. And I just love them with my whole heart. And they honestly are my passion. And I feel like I found my purpose in life, which is to be a voice for these voiceless animals and these mistreated animals. So that's where
That's
I'm at
beautiful.
today. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. I love it. And they're so cute. I also have like an affinity for the misfit animals, the ones that other
Yes,
people don't
yes.
necessarily see the
Yeah, exactly.
adorableness of. I think probably my favorites are bats, and a lot of people are freaked out by bats. They don't want
Oh,
anything to do
bats
with
are
them.
adorable. They're
Yes.
adorable.
All right. So I'm glad that we can all agree that hermit crabs are adorable as well,
Yep.
if not just a little bit intimidating because of
Yes.
that, especially the pincher claw.
Some people think they resemble spiders, which I totally get, but I
Yeah.
also find spiders adorable. So
Oh,
regardless, I know I love little spiders, especially those little jumping spiders. They're so
I'll
cute.
admit, I follow a couple of those on Instagram and
Mhm.
they are very cute, but I'd rather just see the pictures and
No,
videos.
that's valid. Yes. Yeah, totally. But the claws can be intimidating. However, they'll only ever pinch you if they feel threatened or like their life's in danger. So hermit crabs shouldn't be handled anyways, but as an experienced owner, if you're going to hold yours for a minute or two, you can build trust bonds with your hermit crabs. Like
Mhm.
my hermit crab Norton, for example, completely trusts me, does not feel threatened. He'll just crawl right onto my hand and yeah, he's just a cutie, but
That's wonderful. And I love the name.
Norton.
It's a very human name.
Yeah. Yep. Big Nort.
So you have, is it four of them?
I have five.
Oh, five. Okay. What are the other ones' names?
We got Norton, Tito, Scooter, Peony, and Steely.
I love it.
Yep.
Are
Yep.
there any stories behind those names?
Norton, I just looked at him and was like, that's Norton. Tito is named after the alcoholic beverage, because
Okay.
Tito's is always my go-to. And Steely is named after the band Steely Dan. I'm really into
Okay.
70s, 80s yacht rock, so Steely Dan. Peony was already named from the previous owner I rescued from, and I just honored Peeny's name. I thought it was a cute name. And Scooter, I think I just found that a cute name too. He was a really small little baby, and he just looked like a little scooter to me. But
Fair enough.
yeah, yes,
They do kind of scoot a little bit
yeah,
sometimes.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
they scoot along.
it fits.
Exactly.
So I guess how did you amass all of the information that you have about the proper care since there is so much misinformation
Yeah.
out there?
Yeah, so if you just Google how to care for hermit crabs, a majority of that information is just false or inaccurate.
Hmm.
And so when people come to me asking me questions about proper care, I like to lead them to certain resources such as LICOS, which is the abbreviation of Land Hermit Crab Owner Society. So
Okay.
LHCOS. And they are extremely credible, filled with experts in that community that can really help people out, as well as the Crab Street Journal. And there's a bunch of Facebook groups, which I didn't know until this recent year, actually. There's a bunch of Facebook group communities for hermit crabs and their owners and proper care. There's a nutrition one for their diet. There's the Life Ghost one. There's adoption ones. It's a really great community that I always push people towards because you can just ask any hermit crab question you have, and experts will be right there to answer you. And yeah, so there's so much out there. It's just about finding the correct resources.
Sure. I'm sure
Yeah.
that can be daunting for anyone who's probably thinking that they're doing right by
Yeah.
their little shelled friends. So I will make sure I'm going to add links to those
Yeah.
different like the Land Hermit Crab Owners
Society.
Society.
Yep.
Yes,
Yep.
I'll link those so that people who are looking for better information know that they're getting it from a reputable
Yes.
source.
Yes, exactly. Perfect.
All right. So what's the bare minimum that should be required by even pet stores before they'll sell them to you?
So the absolute bare minimum, and even the bare minimum can be a long and daunting list.
Hmm.
So hermit crabs, at least the species most commonly sold in the United States, commonly known as purple pinchers because of their little big purple pincher claw.
Sure.
They are from the Caribbean originally, and even like deep in the Florida Keys. So
Okay.
in general, they're not domestic to the United States, except like the Florida Keys, the most like southern Caribbean part.
Sure.
But they are from tropical environments. So replicating tropical environments such as 80% humidity, 80 degrees Fahrenheit, that is crucial. You could do high 70s, low 80s for both too, but my sweet spot, in my opinion, is 80% humidity and 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's
Sure.
just heat and humidity. Substrate, or also it's their sand. Um,
Hmm.
Hermit crabs need to molt to grow, and it's a process just like as snakes shed their skin, hermit crabs
Hmm.
shed their exoskeleton. And in order for hermit crabs to successfully molt and grow, they have to bury themselves and dig underground into that
Hmm.
substrate. And 6 inches minimum is what's recommended for a proper
Oh,
substrate. And
wow.
to get
Okay.
even more tedious, a 5-to-1 ratio of play sand to eco earth. And play sand is just regular sand you can get at your local Ace Hardware, Home Depot,
Okay.
and then the eco earth is like a coconut fiber. It kind of looks like soil, but it's like
Oh,
coconut. It's
yeah.
used for
Like the
reptiles a lot.
expanding stuff, right?
Exactly, exactly.
Okay.
You
I
can
use
buy
that
it
for my
in,
house plants.
yes, exactly. You can buy it in brick form or it's
Hmm.
already shredded up in a bag.
Okay.
Yeah, 5-to-1 ratio of sand to eco earth, 6 inches minimum. So that is what you need for them, just as their substrate to
Hmm.
provide proper molting conditions. And if we move on to, let's go to food.
Sure.
Hermit crabs, they're omnivores, and a lot of people don't realize that. And I didn't realize that in the very beginning either. So we can't
Okay.
just feed them fruits and veggies. They're fine and good for them, but they need a high protein diet,
Okay.
specifically animal protein. Should make up at least, well, protein ingredients should make up at least 50% of their diet, and
Oh,
majority of these protein ingredients being animal protein. And that is crucial for them. And a lot of people just don't realize that. So
sure.
their
I
diet,
certainly didn't.
yeah, their diet is really tedious. They need animal protein, plant protein, fats, calcium, fruits, veggies, harvestables, sea veggies. There's just so much that they require in their diet to be healthy and thrive.
Well, sure.
And
I mean, you can usually assume that if they were living their little wildlife, they'd be
yes,
eating all kinds of different things all day,
exactly.
every day. Yeah.
Exactly. And to bounce off what you just said, in the wild, they are natural foragers. They are natural
Mm.
scavengers. So in the wild where they're from, they have a bunch of leaves and just foraging items, flowers and moss and bark on the ground. So also providing proper foraging items such as leaf litter and little flower mixes. There's a bunch of Etsy shops that
Oh,
sell crab food. Honestly, the Etsy shops are like one of the number one things I will always recommend anyone that reaches out to me for the hermit crabs. It is one of
okay.
the best things you could ever do. Like just the amount of food and items and just helpful nutritional needs that your hermit crab needs. They're just all right there on those Etsy shops.
That's
Because
really cool. I wouldn't have thought that.
yeah, like I don't have, for example, shrimp heads or like bison in my kitchen to feed them.
I
So
don't usually either.
yes, exactly. So that's where Etsy, these Etsy shops come in handy, and it's a great community. And yeah, it's just great. And to segue into their water, you can't just feed them regular, or not feed them, provide them regular tap water because it's
Hmm.
actually, it can actually really harm them. The chemicals found in our tap water.
Things like
But
chlorine and stuff, right?
exactly, exactly.
Okay.
And so what is recommended is to use tap water, but you need a water conditioner. A
Hmm.
popular brand is called Chem Prime. And if by putting the Chem Prime in the water, it takes out all those harmful chemicals, but also still keeps the beneficial minerals found in tap.
Okay.
And so bottled water, distilled water, and tap water alone is no good for hermit crabs. They need a special treated water. And they
Okay.
need both a freshwater pool and a saltwater pool. And they have to be deep enough for them to fully submerge in, but also easy to get in and out. So there's just
Okay.
like a bunch of tedious little things in each step of their care that
Sure.
yeah, it takes a lot and it takes a lot of research because no one's just going to know this off the top of their head.
Yeah.
And that's why there's just so much misinformation out there about hermit crabs and what they require and need. And of course, you need a bunch of hiding accessories, climbing accessories. They're nocturnal naturally. So
Okay.
and they're natural animals of prey. So by providing a bunch of hiding and climbing elements in their tank, they can feel safe and nap during the day and snug. They like to snuggle in like little moss pits
Oh,
together. It's so cute.
that is
But
adorable.
yeah, providing them just a sense of safety is extremely important as well. So
Sure.
And of course, shells. You need a bunch of shells provided for them. Um,
Yes, and we want the unpainted ones,
yeah,
correct?
painted shells are they're toxic for hermit crabs, and
Mm-hmm.
hermit crabs in their shells, they naturally will, quote unquote, like do renovations to their homes. They will
Okay.
pick at and nibble at their shells to like create just like more space for themselves and to just kind of
Oh,
customize the shape of their shell. And when they do that, if it's in a painted shell, the paint can chip and they could accidentally ingest it, and that can really create them to become sick or kill them or just
sure.
really, it's really bad. And regardless of the health aspect, why are we painting live creatures to market to children, you know?
Yeah.
So,
I honestly had no idea that they actually modified their shells. I kind
yeah,
of just assumed that it was like lingering fumes and the possibility of chipping, but not
yeah.
necessarily it almost seems guaranteed that it would if they're actually going to be actively changing
Yep,
the shell.
exactly. So with the modification and just paint in general chipping over time through wear and tear, it's
Yeah.
just it's a recipe for disaster for them. So
Well, and I mean, aren't there whole groups of people that like to forage for natural seashells anyway? Shells are beautiful all on their own.
exactly.
We don't need to do
Exactly.
anything different.
Yep, they just want to paint SpongeBob on the shells to market to kids, and it's just they're the furthest thing from a beginner pet for a child. So,
Yeah, I think anything that's like, especially in like the reptile, amphibian,
mhm,
that type of thing, there's so much preciseness that goes into managing the
exactly.
temperature and the humidity and everything. That is not a beginner thing at all. It
No,
explains why
no.
all of my pets are furry.
Yeah, that's so, yeah, that's so true.
So tell me about like how much space does each
Mhm.
hermit crab need?
So the rule of thumb is 10 gallons per hermit crab. And if they're
Okay.
a bigger hermit crab, then 15 gallons per jumbo hermit crab is what they're called. So,
Okay.
for example, I have 5 hermit crabs, so I have a 55-gallon tank. If you have four, then you should have a minimum of a 40-gallon tank. And the absolute minimum of any tank should be around 20 gallons. A
Okay.
lot of 10-gallon tanks are sold, but it's recommended to start off at 20 minimum, regardless of one or two hermit crabs.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you think about just the amount of space that the sand will take up, if they
Yeah,
have to have 6 inches of
yeah,
depth there, that's going to take up like half
exactly.
the entire thing.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really important to have a proper size tank. And hermit crabs are very, very social creatures,
Mhm.
despite being called hermit crabs. So they thrive in colonies and thrive with friends. So it's ideal to have a minimum of 2 hermit crabs, which would translate into a minimum of a 20-gallon tank anyways.
Sure,
Yeah.
makes perfect sense. All right, so I don't think I'd ever heard that they were social either,
Hmm.
and I got started as a groomer working at PetSmart. And
Hmm.
before I was a groomer, or well, I was only a bather there, but before I moved into the grooming salon, I was one of the people that like caught the fish and sold hermit crabs. And I thought I knew pretty well what they needed, but I honestly thought that they did better solitary. So this is all brand new information for me.
Interesting. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
I
Yeah.
mean, there's always a bunch of different like care requirements. They've got like the
Yeah.
little pamphlets and stuff. And I'm pretty sure, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure even that said that they preferred to be alone. So very eye opening.
Yeah, not to bash on the pet stores, but
Yeah.
most of the time they know either nothing or just too little about what hermit crabs require. And that's not the employee's fault because they're just not
Sure.
told. They're not told. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So,
Yes,
yeah.
unfortunately, especially the big pet stores, they really miss the mark quite often.
Yup, yup.
Yeah. And I feel like it's one of those things where probably nobody that big should be selling animals, period.
Yes,
Hopefully
exactly.
one day we'll get there.
Yeah. That's the goal.
Yes. So, okay, so you said you have a 55-gallon tank,
Yep.
and do you have, I'm assuming you've got some pictures and videos of your little crabbies in there as well,
Oh,
right?
yes, of course, of course. Norton does tank tours on TikTok and Instagram as well.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Well, I'll have to steal some pictures and videos from you
Oh, for
to
sure.
post with the episode as well, because
Of
I love
course.
watching them do their thing. Just whatever they're doing, it's always fascinating.
Yeah. I just sit there for hours at night and just watch them.
Oh, I'm sure. Better
It's
than
my
TV.
therapy. Yeah.
Yeah. See, at our house, we only ever have like the nature channel on the TV. And I mean, let's see here. We've got 3 dogs, 3 cats, 2 bunnies, a
Wow.
one-eyed hedgehog, and a ferret. So we're not hurting for animal entertainment
Yeah.
here.
That's a
But oh
whole
man,
handful. Wow.
do you have
Adorable.
other critters besides the hermit crabs as well?
So we have a family dog. We have a long-haired miniature dachshund named Milo.
Oh,
Yeah. So we're a dog
awesome.
family too. We did have a rabbit. He unfortunately passed a couple years ago, but he lived out his whole life. He lived to like 11 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, he
That's
had a great,
fantastic.
yeah. So we had a bunny and yeah, and I have my hermit crabs. So
Wonderful. All
yeah.
right. So you said that Norton is your he's your biggest guy.
Yeah.
How old is he? Do you know?
So it's impossible to tell the exact age of a hermit crab unless you hatch the eggs yourself, for example.
Oh, okay.
The breeding is a whole other thing we can talk about, but Norton I got 6.5 years ago about. So my gut estimation is he's somewhere between 10 and 15 years old.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, if I had to guess. Yeah.
So there's not like a system for judging the growth or anything of a
Yeah.
hermit crab then?
As of right now, it's impossible to tell unless you hatch them yourself and like keep a log of how old they are.
Sure.
But you can generally maybe guess by, I mean, size actually doesn't always determine age either. So it's tricky. But I mean, I've had him for 6.5 years, and then we can imagine he was unfortunately in the industry for about a year or so being taken from the wild and transported and being sold. And then he probably had a few years in the wild because he wasn't a small boy when I got him. He was,
Oh, okay.
yeah, he was pretty big compared to the ones you'll see sold. So I assume he's
Okay.
between 10 and 15.
All right. And is he your oldest hermit crab?
I've had him the longest.
Okay.
I don't know their ages. It's hard to tell, but he is the biggest. I've had him the longest. He just seems like he's the oldest, judging by having them for so long.
Sure.
I'm looking at him right now, which is why I'm looking over. Norton's out and about right now, but yeah,
Man, he woke up early.
I know. I don't know when Norton sleeps, but he's just, the day I got him, he was the most active and outgoing little hermit crab ever. Like you can't even scare him if you tried.
Oh,
So
wow.
I've just had this special bond with him since day one. He trusts me, I trust him.
He knows he's got it great here. He can't do any better, right?
Yeah, yeah. I hope so. I hope that's how he feels.
I'm going to choose to believe that just because, I mean, it sounds like you've got it pretty on lockdown.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So, do you have any? I mean, you said that Norton likes to do his little tank tours and whatnot. Do you have any fun stories for us about your crabs?
Yeah, there's so many. Let me think. So
Okay.
one cute one is I can hand feed them. So
Oh,
they'll eat out of my hand if I like hold a piece of popcorn, for example, and put it inside the tank. Norton will, or really any of them will walk up to my hand and take it with their little claws from me. So
that's
that's
so cool.
cute. Other times they like to steal each other's shells sometimes.
Oh,
So even though they have 30 plus shells available of all shapes and sizes they could ever want, for example, Tito shell jacked Norton a couple years ago and just left Norton high and dry and had to go pick his own shell. And it's just you'll randomly wake up and they'll be swapped in different shells, and you're like, what happened? But
Okay,
um,
so that makes me wonder how the heck do you tell them apart if they can fit in the same shells and
so
switch
yeah,
them?
I get that question a lot, and I feel like it's just the equivalent of you see two identical twins and the mom just knows which one's which.
Okay.
It's like that with my hermit crabs. Like just even if they were all shellless and the same size, like I can just tell. I can't really explain it. I can just tell.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I had more ferrets at one point and they've slowly passed away over the years.
Oh,
And the one that I have left is a litter mate from another one that had passed 2 years ago, and nobody could ever tell them apart. Even in pictures now, I'll show my husband and I'll be like, "All right, who's who? Which one's Miko?" And nobody else can tell the difference but me. And I feel like it's pretty obvious. So I guess it has to be pretty similar for you.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's so funny. I quiz like my parents, for example, like who's this? Who is it? But yeah.
How do your parents feel about the crabs? Are they kind of eked out by them, or are they just as excited about them?
Well, my dad couldn't care less. Like he's not, he's just like whatever. But my mom, I'm the way I am with animals and nature and just because of her. So
Okay.
when I was little and had the hermit crabs as a kid, since I was just a kid, she did all the caring for them.
Mhm.
And I mean, she did a really good job in comparison to how hermit crabs are usually treated in captivity.
Sure.
But of course, wasn't nearly where it should have been. But she did a great job. So when I went to college, for example, for 4 years, she took care of my hermit crabs while I was gone.
Oh,
Because I
wow.
here with them. She's just really good at taking care of my hermit crabs. And so she loves them too. The only annoying part she finds is when I redo their tank and sand gets all over the house, but that's
Oh,
valid. So
yeah, understandable.
yeah.
That's
Yeah,
so cool. And I love that she did the best she could with what she knew at the time. And then when she knew better, she did better. That's amazing.
exactly. Yeah. And I'm
Yes.
always learning too. I'm still always learning about these hermit crabs. And it's just amazing having the hermit crab community that there is to you're just always learning, you're always helping each other. And I wish I knew all this like 6 years ago, but I'm just happy to be an outlet and a resource for other beginners and to be there and help them guide them in their journey. So
Well, that's amazing. And I mean, honestly, isn't learning new things and just continually growing, isn't that kind of the point of what we're doing here?
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
if you knew it all back then, you wouldn't have been able to grow the way you have now.
exactly. That's a really good outlook. Yep.
Yeah. I love it. And I'm very passionate about like continued education and just kind of always having that thirst for knowledge. Just
Yeah.
always wanting to understand better the things that are going on around you. So I really love that whole evolution that you've had where you found this little critter that you really liked and you have just, I mean, you've basically turned your entire life upside down to
Yeah.
do the very very best for them as you learn the new information. That's wonderful. It's
Yeah,
very
totally.
inspirational.
Oh, thank you.
It's true. I mean, especially working with the general public as a groomer and everything, I hear so often it's just a pet, it's just an animal, it's just a dog. And to me, it's never just anything.
Oh,
So I
never.
love meeting other people that it's never just a crab. It's not,
Oh,
it's special. It's its own little thing. It's its own little
exactly.
being. Yeah, it's
Oh,
wonderful.
they're my little best friends.
So, uh, one of my, I guess, more terrifying questions is it's really hard sometimes to tell if a crab is just molting or if it's actually gone and died in the sand.
Yeah.
How do you tell the difference?
So when a hermit crab dies, it will really smell of fish, just as like
Okay.
any sea creature that would probably die would smell like. And so that's a very easy, like step one method to take if you're wondering. And sometimes hermit crabs surface molt. So
Oh.
like the molting I talked about earlier when they go underground to molt,
Hmm.
and molting takes anywhere from a few weeks to a few months. Someone even had a hermit crab molt for around 14 months with them, and
Wow.
that's crazy. So a lot of the times when hermit crabs don't have the proper conditions to molt, such as the substrate's not deep enough or the substrate's not the correct consistency,
Hmm.
then they will do what's called a surface molt, and they'll do the molting process above ground. And the way that looks is a lot of people think, oh, my hermit crab's dead, like it's hanging out of its shell. And when they
Oh.
shed their exoskeleton just looks like a body, basically, because it's the encasing of what they once were. So
Hmm.
a lot of people think that's the dead body when it's actually a surface molt. And surface molts aren't ideal, but it happens. So when you pick up the shell thinking that your hermit crab's body is just on the substrate when it's actually
Hmm.
their exoskeleton, you'll look inside the shell and see a new, very pale, very matte looking little hermit crab because they just shed their old exoskeleton. They have this new fresh skin and they'll be in their shell, but it's important to there's a lot of like there's protocol to take when you have a surface molter because it's a very vulnerable process and
Sure.
molting hermit crabs smell like food. They don't appear
Oh.
as friends to their tank mates. And that's where if a hermit crab isn't getting enough animal protein in their diet, that's when they resort to cannibalism, and a molter is a perfect target. And they
Oh
don't resort
dear.
to cannibalism because of any malicious intent. It's because of survival. Like if I don't
Sure.
eat you, I will die. So it's not the hermit crab's fault. It's a matter of survival for them.
Sure. I
Um,
mean, isn't that kind of how it is with most animals? They're not, I feel like animals aren't really capable of being malicious. They're
oh
just
no,
doing what
never.
they can to get
Yeah.
by.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, hermit crabs are very social creatures. They love their companions.
Mhm.
So it's sad when a hermit crab has to resort to cannibalism because, they don't want to die. So
Yeah.
it's hard. And another way, like when hermit crabs molt, like I said, it can take weeks, it can take months. That one hermit crab took over a year. And
Hmm.
you can naturally think, like, is my hermit crab even alive? I haven't seen him for 8 months. So it can be hard because if you dig up a molting hermit crab, you could greatly injure it. You could
Yeah.
disrupt the molt to the point you kill it. And it's a hard situation to be in. So I always recommend is when in doubt, just do nothing. Don't go digging, don't go looking, don't do anything to disturb any hermit crab underground. It's just best to give it months and months of time than to accidentally disrupt a molting hermit crab and end up injuring it or killing it.
Absolutely. So I've never heard of them taking that long to molt. I
Yeah.
thought it was usually like a week or two. What is it that takes the process so long, or do we even know that?
So what I've learned is the process is they of course dig underground, they burrow, they make their little cave to molt. And
Hmm.
the shedding of the exoskeleton, I believe that can take a few days. They're wiggling out of their old skin. And
Hmm.
the recovery process is a lot because they're very fragile and vulnerable after a molt, and they still need to gain back their strength. They need to harden and strengthen their new exoskeleton back. So they'll camp down there in their little caves and eat their old exoskeleton because it's a source of calcium and nutrients and will help them grow back stronger and to harden their
Hmm.
exoskeleton. And then they will head back up above the substrate. But the whole process just takes a while because the recovery is what I've learned.
Okay, so it's not actually the process of them trying to get out of the shell that whole time, but
Yeah.
more so the recovery and hardening the new shell.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Well, that
Yeah.
makes more sense because I was like, how on earth could you just be wrestling with your clothes for that
Yeah.
long?
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy. But the bigger the hermit crab, generally the longer it'll take. But the less frequently they'll molt. So like little babies, they're gonna molt a lot more in a year, but it will take a lot shorter.
Oh, okay.
generally
All right.
speaking. Yeah.
That makes sense. Less skin to shed in the first
Yes.
place.
Yep.
So you mentioned something about captive breeding. I'm assuming that that's kind of a much more even more precise ordeal than just having them as pets. And so I'm assuming most crabs are caught from the wild, right?
Yes. So basically, all hermit crabs sold at pet stores and the beach shops are all taken from the wild, all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And shout out to Mary Akers. She's like the pioneer of the hermit crab world. She was one of the first to captive breed hermit crabs, and
Oh,
it basically requires an entire laboratory setup, around the clock attention and care. Like it's a full-time job. And
wow.
so her successfully captive breeding was like a pivotal moment in the hermit crab world because this could be the future of the industry. Maybe we can
Sure.
keep, or not we, as in the industry, maybe they can stop harvesting from the wild and
Mm-hmm.
we can put our attention into captive breeding and maybe this is the way to go. Maybe this is possible because it's a lot more humane and ethical and it's the industry is just a sickening process, what they do to these hermit crabs. So the thought of captive breeding being an option could open the doors to saving millions of hermit crabs every year.
And just all the suffering involved as well for the ones that do survive, right?
Yeah, so we get into the industry. Hermit crabs that are taken from the wild are stuffed into sacks and water bottles, just stuffed in there like they're rocks. And they're taken to these wooden barracks, a holding, like quote unquote, a holding cell. And they have no food, no water, probably not proper heat and humidity, just climbing all over each other. And so basically, they are just dying in mass numbers. And the ones that do survive after being held captive in like this wooden prison, they are put into nutcracker-like devices and cracked out of their natural shells
Mm.
because then they're thrown into a bin of these painted shells, so they're forced to change into a painted shell because without a shell, a hermit crab will die. So it's either they die or we jump into the SpongeBob shell. And
Mm-hmm.
then the hermit crabs that survive that process are then again thrown into sacks, shipped off to whatever Petco or beach shop, and
Mm-hmm.
then they're in those shops without the proper care again. And the ones that survive that are then 9 out of 10 times probably taken home to the wrong home that doesn't know how to take care of them. And,
Sure.
the stores don't educate the customers on how to properly care, or if they do, it's just wrong information. And it
Mm-hmm.
either comes down to just ignorance or just not caring about hermit crabs, like just not caring and just they just want to make a few bucks. So it's just really heartbreaking what hermit crabs go through. It's literally animal abuse happening, and
Yeah.
that's why I'm just trying to spread the word because these are living innocent creatures, and if this was happening to the dogs or cats, it would be an outrage. And
Absolutely.
why should these animals suffer? They aren't toys, they aren't souvenirs, they aren't for just a fun 1 week pet. Like these are living creatures that can live 50 years.
Yeah, it seems just absolutely heart-wrenching to think about all of those hermit crabs essentially just being collected so they can die basically
Yep.
elsewhere. It's
Yep.
and you'd think that the process of catching them would be difficult and expensive enough that they might care about making sure that the poor things survive the whole
Yeah.
process. And sticking them in the little nutcracker, I can't imagine that's precise enough to protect their very vulnerable little
Yeah.
bodies.
They'll just, I mean, a lot die in that process or get injured, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot are just thrown in the trash because there's behind the scene video on YouTube, which I can send you the link, but someone, I think it was like a PETA person, got behind the scenes video of one of the hermit crab industry, what's the word, buildings or the barracks where they keep them. And
Mm-hmm.
you just see dead hermit crabs littering the floor and just body parts and them all climbing over each other because they're probably scared to death. They're natural animals.
Oh, sure.
And without the proper humidity, they're going to suffocate to death because they have modified gills. So I
Hmm.
doubt I doubt their top concern was having proper humidity for these hermit crabs. So it's just, it's heartbreaking. These hermit crabs each have their own little personalities, just like how our dogs do.
Yeah.
And, they live 50 years in the wild, and it just comes down to it's straight up animal abuse.
Yeah, I can't say that I don't think there is any argument for the opposite, that it isn't. So
Yeah.
what what can your average Joe and perhaps
Mhm.
our listeners, what can we do to kind of combat this? Because I'm sure that a lot of people are still going to want to have them as pets.
Yeah, of course.
So what is something that people can do to not play into this
Mhm.
cruel industry?
So what the hermit crab community advocates as a whole is adopt, don't shop.
Okay.
So if you want a hermit crab, don't go to your local Petco or don't go to that beach shop on the boardwalk and buy a
Mm-hmm.
hermit crab because you're giving money to the industry and they're just going to replace that hermit crab. So they're going to take more from the wild to replace the one
Mm-hmm.
you bought. So it's just perpetuating the industry by shopping from these stores that sell them. But what we can do is there are a bunch of adoption resources, such as Land Hermit Crab Owner Society Lycos. They have an
Mm-hmm.
adoption form you can fill out. There are Facebook groups just for adoptions for hermit crabs or rehoming. So if you have a hermit crab that you don't think you can properly take care of anymore, you can also rehome them on these pages
Mm-hmm.
as well as find hermit crabs to adopt. So by that, we are just adopting from each other and rehoming within each other rather than spending our money at these shops and giving the industry money. So they can do that. And the captive breeding, that's like a whole new great thing in this community, but beginners should not get captive breds. They should just adopt through the programs like I mentioned. But
Okay.
experienced owners, they can look into getting captive breds. So that's also another option.
Wonderful. So is the breeding, you said it's new. How new are we talking? Is it something where it's not really feasible to be able to even find a captive
Yeah.
bred hermit crab?
So I forget the exact year, but I think is, it's like been like a handful of years, not too long
Okay.
ago, but not very recent. At least with Mary Akers, because I know a lot about Mary Akers and her nonprofit called Hermit House, which
Hermit
is the
house.
captive breeding. So
Okay.
that is newish, but it's been around for a tad, and she's done, I think, a few generations of breeding by now.
Okay.
And from what I've learned is that these hermit crabs are eligible to be adopted after a year being kept with Mary. And the first retailer ever, she partnered with, it's called Josh's Frogs, and
Okay.
they sell the captive bred hermit crabs. But like I said, beginners should not be buying captive breds, only experienced owners. It's recommended, and of course, having the proper setup and everything you could possibly need beforehand adopting these captive breds. So
Sure.
that's in the works. Just trying to spread, I guess, awareness on the captive breeding option, and let's just keep wild hermit crabs wild, and let's, the captive breeding is such a breakthrough, basically, and
Sure.
it's still new. Only so many people have done it, like a very, very, very small amount, and it is so hard to do.
Oh,
So
I can't
it's
imagine.
Yes, so much more like time and research needs to be put into that area of things so we can stop the industry and keep wild hermit crabs wild.
I'm curious if you know if of like the environmental impact of all of the wild captures. Is it I don't know how important hermit crabs are to their ecosystem or if
Mhm.
we as humans have messed it up in any way.
So, hermit crabs, it's not a sustainable method, how they're
Sure.
harvesting these wild hermit crabs. They're taking so many, like this one, New Jersey beach shop. I don't know which one, but they were bragging about selling, I think, 1 million hermit crabs in 1 year. And if
Wow.
out of those 1 million, I'm sure there's only so many that are still alive today. And it's just so
Mm-hmm.
sad. And so that's just 1 million hermit crabs from one store alone.
Yeah.
It's not sustainable, and locals have noticed populations diminishing.
Mm-hmm.
And hermit crabs are natural foragers and scavengers, so they're eating all the leftovers basically. So they're kind of like a cleanup crew for the wild.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I don't know the extent of the impact specifically, but with common sense, I'm sure any animal that is diminishing, it's going to leave an impact on the ecosystem.
We just don't necessarily know it yet.
Yeah, it might be out there. I just personally don't know it. So,
Sure. Well, you have been an absolutely amazing resource just to learn from today. And I will make sure I'm going to give you the opportunity to plug all of your social media so that listeners can find you and whatever resources you are putting out there, as well as Norton's tank tours, because now I'm very excited. I need to see those myself. So would you like to tell the listeners where they can find you
sure.
on the world of the internet?
Yes, yes. My TikTok is Janie Lee, JANIELEIGH 11. And my Instagram is jgroel11, JGROEL 11. Or you can just look up Janie Groeling on either, and I'm sure I'll pop up. But I have a
Okay.
bunch of helpful hermit crab resources in both of those bios. So I always direct people to those, and it can lead you to a world of resources for hermit crabs and their care.
Wonderful. I'll make sure to link your socials in the show notes as well so that people can very easily find you.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you very much for coming on and just giving us, I mean, so much information that I never would have even known where to find it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. And I really appreciate the platform you're providing me with because really it means so much to even just help or educate one person from this. So,
Absolutely. Every little bit helps.
yep.
All right, listeners, there you have it. If you are looking for some little crabby friends, or perhaps have some already and would like to give them a gold standard in care, you have now some amazing new resources that I will be linking in the show notes and probably, if they'll let me, tagging on social media as well. So thank you everyone so much for listening. Give us a rating, a review. It really does help to get us just some more listens and just kind of spread the word. And if you would like to stay updated on what's going on with the All for Animals podcast, please feel free to go and like and follow us on social media as well. Thank you everyone for listening. I'll see you next time.